Joshua Robinson is originally from the UK but now resides in Adelaide and attends the Salisbury ecclesia. Joshua is involved in the publication of the Faith Alive magazine and joins Wilderness Conversations to tell us about the magazine. Joining us on Wilderness Conversations today, we've got Joshua Robinson. Welcome to Wilderness Conversations, Josh.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me.
Josh is involved with the magazine Faith Alive, which we'll get into in just a second. But before we get into that, Josh, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Sure, no problem. Well, I'm originally from the UK, moved to Australia, and I, with my wife Susie, we're the only people on the editorial panel that are actually not located in the UK. We're in Adelaide, South Australia, at the Salisbury ecclesia.
You're involved with, as we mentioned, the Faith Alive magazine. Tell us a little bit about that magazine.
No problem. So it's a little bit different to some of the other magazines in circulation around Christadelphia, in the fact that it's primarily targeted at those who are under 25. So it's a young people's magazine. If you open it, the articles, for instance, are only 300 to 400 words. They're nowhere near the length of some of the other magazines. The format is much brighter, much happier, hopefully a lot more engaging. Not that we're putting other magazines down, but we're specifically trying to target young people and get them to reading biblical material.
The first thing that struck me looking at the magazine, without getting into the content, was just the style of the editing. It's actually looks really professional, and you must have some pretty skilled people doing the marcoms on this. It really does look impressive.
Yeah, we do. In fact, there's one person at the Christadelphian Office that he tries and fits it around all the other jobs that he's got to do. But we've recently updated that design, and I think he's having some great fun, if I'm allowed to say that, but fun, updating the design, updating the graphics, adding extra ideas, and we've actually gone to a slightly smaller size now as well, so you can fit it into your Bible, rather than being sort of slightly awkward.
It's very impressive to look at, and it draws you in, and you sort of kind of want to read it. I'm over 25, but maybe I'm under 25 at heart, because I actually really, really enjoy reading it. You mentioned the target audience. Tell me a little more about how you target that audience.
Yeah. So particularly, we're talking 16 to 25. Who will sort of access it a little bit younger, about age 13. So some of the topics we have dealt with in the past probably a little bit more sensitive. So we say 16 to 25. And the way we try and make it more accessible for that age range is by having a lot of the authors in that age range. So they themselves can relate to the readership. That really works out quite well. The target audience is not just that age range, but we also have a number of people that read it with English as a second language. So people who might find that English is quite complicated in the magazine, the Christadelphian magazine, something that's a bit smaller, a shorter, a bit simpler. That's another reason why we actually use the English Standard Version instead of the King James Version in Faith Alive, is to make it accessible for those who might not be so fluent in English. And it's great. We've actually had a letter of appreciation, I think it was from Mauritius or somewhere like that, saying we really appreciate Alive and all the articles and all the writers. And it's lovely to see it being used with the CBM. I don't know if the ACBM and the CBMA use it as well, but just something to give to people, say, after they've been baptized, but maybe don't have as much knowledge on the truth.
I could see the magazine being really useful in some of those areas. I've had a little bit to do with, preaching in some of the areas that we look after from here in Australia, and I think that type of material would be perfect.
Yeah, so that's sort of another secondary target audience, let's say, and one that's growing and getting bigger, particularly in the UK, where there's a lot of Persians, a lot of Iranians and other refugees that are there at the moment, and so many are being baptized, which is wonderful, but they don't always have great English. Apparently I don't always have great English either. Their English language skills are perhaps not as developed as ours. And so to have Faith Alive is a great way of engaging them in some of the work that the Christadelphian Office in the UK, and a great way of introducing them to that.
It's connected with the Christadelphia magazine. So what's sort of the history of it and how did it start?
So Christadelphian magazine, has been going a lot longer than Faith Alive. Faith Alive's been going for about 44 years. We've just printed issue 132 with 3 issues a year. That's 44 years. And I think it's just seeing the need that they need something for young people. Youth groups, something that was started sort of during the war, and then sort of after that, I think it's carrying on and developing and evolving that process of how to get young people involved and how do we get young people to access biblical material.
I'm surprised. I came across it a couple of years ago. I had no idea that it's got that much history. That surprises me.
Yeah, and that's partly why we're involved. It's because they have seen that it's a lot. It's very focused in the UK. It's sort of this UK-centric magazine, and although the Christadelphian magazine itself is known worldwide, Faith Alive is a lot less well known. And so what we're trying to do is get authors from all over the world to contribute. And then that also raises awareness of Faith Alive. And for instance, we've got 200 copies to give out at the Adelaide study so that people can have a look and be aware of this other magazine, which has been going for a while.
Well, that's fantastic. What's the significance of the name, Faith Alive?
I would say it's just the idea that how do you make your faith live? I don't know if there was any particular reason behind that or someone coined the phrase, but it's definitely something that's carried on. In fact, we've just phased out the exclamation mark that was after Faith Alive. It used to be Faith Alive,
Right.
But it's one of those things that as we sort of consider faith, and you consider the fact that faith is so often theoretical, but yet Faith Alive is really trying to say, well, this is our faith. How do we then live that? And I think that's another key element to the magazine is taking it from the theoretical and translating it into the practical.
I definitely got that impression actually reading through. And in fact, I was looking at just a couple of the issues, the last few days as I was thinking about our conversation. And it is one of those things that strikes me. I was looking at the April edition, for instance, which is fantastic, I've got to say. It's on royalty, sort of, the history of the kings of Israel and Judah. And each one has, that sort of 300 words about the king, but also, well, so what? What's the lesson? That sort of punchy message towards the end is very effective.
Absolutely. And it's incredible. And we're really thankful to all of our authors that it's incredible the fact that they can all do that at the end. And yes, we sometimes have a little bit of editing, so we'll give them direction as well. But to finish it off with something that really drives home the message, I think is great.
So who works on the magazine? What does it take to get a magazine out? I'm assuming is it once a quarter or once every 6 months?
3 times a year.
Okay. So
historically, there used to be a gathering in May and October at Sonic weekends, and it used to be delivered for that. And then another time during the year. I don't believe the Young Bulls weekend in October exists anymore, though I did go a couple of years. But the idea is that you have a theme for the issue. The editorial panel. So there's 2 couples and a couple of other people that contribute. So we've got someone in Wales, someone in Scotland, someone in England, someone in Australia. We're not trying to cover all the countries in the UK. But that creates an editorial panel. The editorial panel come up with a theme. They divide the theme up into relevant articles. So normally it's about 20 articles per issue. And then we go and source some authors. And with each of the titles, we also give a little bit of a breakup so that we don't have as much overlap. And when we send it out to authors, the authors also see the makeup of the entire magazine. And that helps them understand where their article really fits into the flow of everything, which I think helps it be a very cohesive magazine, even though it's written by so many different authors. From that point, we then get it back to the editorial panel, the editors, and we go through the content. We talk to authors if we need to. A lot of the work is actually just sourcing and chasing up people to do it. And then once we've got the content to go through that, and we send it off pretty much as a Word doc to the Christadelphian Office. So The editorial panel is really just about sourcing content. They then do all the work around the design and putting it into place. Then we get the final edits from the assistant editor and the editor of the Christadelphian, and that's when they then set off to be published. So there's a lot of people involved, maybe a bit more than the magazine even, and it goes through all these different checking stages. But yeah, it's great to have so many people involved.
The setting up of the new edition must be a fair bit of work, because actually you must do it effectively, because the other thing I noticed was how the various articles working well together, similar, particularly when you're going through the king. So each king has sort of a bit of a similar look and feel about it. So you don't feel like you're reading just a whole sort of bunch of different sort of ideas on different kings. It's very consistent and makes it easy to read, I thought. So it was quite effective. What do you do? Do you have a particular role on the committee?
This is sort of where maybe the committee differs from other committees, in the fact that what we do is we rotate who takes the central lead on a magazine. So with Susie and I, we're down for the next one, actually. And what you do then is you're the one responsible for sourcing most of the authors. If you need any help, then other people will help out. You then chase them up, you collate the articles, and then everybody works on the collated version. So in terms of workload, it's certainly not as heavy as some committees. And I think what it does is it varies who's asked. So everybody's got their own sphere in which they rotate, the social sphere in Christadelphia, or however you might want to call it. And because we rotate who's in charge of sourcing the authors, we get a whole range, and it varies with each magazine.
So next magazine will have quite a few people from Adelaide.
Potentially, but we have contacts in New Zealand and Canada and America and other places that we've certainly used.
Yeah, that's great. Well, as I mentioned, the April edition was on royalty, and I just thought it was actually fantastic. And coincidentally, in the Sydney CYC this year, they did Kings of Judah as, I don't think it was Kings of Israel. I think it was just Kings of Judah as sort of the theme through the year. So, and not that I'm involved that much. I did one of the talks. I think I did Jehoahaz and Jehoiakim. And I noticed they were two of the kings that were missed out of the magazine, by the way, which is a great shame, but totally understandable. Oh. But you could use this magazine almost as a study guide for a series of studies like that for a youth group or something like that. Fantastic. And then the next one, which I think was the latest edition, which was the July edition on the prophet Ezekiel. Very similar again. If you work through this magazine, either individually or as a group, you'd actually have a really good foundation for diving into the book of Ezekiel in a bit more detail. I actually think it's fantastic.
The latest one has been printed on Holiness, maybe a couple of weeks later than it should have been. But we managed to get all the articles together for that one. So
when's that due out?
Imminently. I mean, it's probably already hit people in the UK. It just takes a little longer to come over to Australia. On the fact of using the magazine as a study guide, we're maybe focusing a little bit more of using it sort of as a preaching tool or first principles. So while you might say, oh, it's great for a study guide for young people, it's sort of this, let's break into a topic when you've never considered the topic before. I mean, Ezekiel is one of these topics and one of these books where it's really hard to break into. How do you understand it? How do you go about it? What are some of the key themes? Why do certain things keep repeating themselves? And so for someone coming new to the truth, be it a young person, be it a person who's come into contact with the truth later in life, just to have something that fairly simply breaks up a topic and then gives you a little bit of meat underneath and then gives you a practical application, that's a really marvelous thing.
Yeah, I thought it was really effective. So it was broken into the background, the man, themes, prophecies, and an epilogue. So how to understand the prophecy, the idolatry of Israel. So that's the context, I guess, the scattering and regathering of Israel, and turn and live. So that was under the heading of background. And then under the man Ezekiel, you had the facts of Ezekiel. I thought that was actually a really interesting page, just a whole series of facts about him. The fact, what does it mean? I've made you a sign, the watchman, Ezekiel's Contemporaries, another great article, I thought, just because it pieces together so many of the people that you hear about, how they all fit in together.
Yeah.
And then some of the themes that you mentioned, Ezekiel's vision on Jerusalem, the cherubim, for my name's sake, the shepherds of Israel, the vine of Israel, and the temple. And then there's some prophecies, which I thought also were excellent. The dry bones, Ezekiel 37, the prophecy fulfillment of Egypt. So why talk about Egypt? What's the point? And then Israel invaded Ezekiel 38 effectively. So, yeah, as you say, a really nice mixture of information for young people and people that are new to the scriptures. Really good.
And we try and change the topic. Ideally, what we do is we do sort of an Old Testament-based topic, a New Testament-based topic, and then sort of like a practical, maybe contemporary issues kind of topic. And that's sort of the aim of the 3 issues in the year. And that's sort of how we break it down typically. So it doesn't always fit exactly into that. So that's the idea. And then change it up between themes and characters and concepts.
So the next issue is on holiness.
Correct.
And from there, where do you go? Is there a vision for the future of the magazine? Do you see it changing in any way, or more of the same?
Well, it has changed so much. I don't know if you've actually looked at any of the editions from maybe 4 or 5 years ago, maybe 5 plus. It was not so theme bound. Sort of, I remember one of my first articles ever. I just wrote in any topic, and they published it. So it was a little bit more like the Christadelphian, as opposed to being a theme. There was also a whole range of articles in terms of length and depth, and so what we've done is we've sort of structured it a bit more. It's become, I think, a bit more tangible and usable, and actually getting to grips with the topic. And then what we've more recently worked on are all those graphics and how we present the information. So there's been a lot of changes recently already. So I think for the moment we'll see how this goes. But in terms of the future, the next issue we're hoping to have on the emblems on the memorial meeting and everything that goes on in the memorial meeting. Just take it apart element by element.
Yeah. Is your focus or goal, and to what extent is it electronically focused or magazine focused? I get the electronic version. So how many electronic versions are downloaded, if you like, versus magazines printed?
I don't have the specific numbers, but I certainly know that a lot of Sunday schools subscribe, and that if it's the Sunday school, then they'll get the paper copy as part of the ecclesias. I know that as people sort of get a bit older and they're starting to subscribe themselves, the electronic copy of the magazine is certainly more popular. And really, the magazine is there to be available in whatever format people prefer. And I think they've made the electronic copy such a reasonable price, in fact, such a low price, that everyone can access it. And even the paper copy, it's free delivery on magazines, even to Australia, which we're amazed by.
It's great value, that's for sure. And I've got to say, the electronic copy is perfect for the iPad. Like the size of the page is really quite accessible on the iPad. It's I think I found it a bit difficult on the phone, but on the iPad it's perfect.
Yeah, well, they've worked out all those technical details.
So what's the best way of people getting their hands on a copy of the magazine?
Go to the Christadelphian website. You can just type in the Christadelphian or the Christadelphian magazine, go up to the website, and then find Faith Live, click on subscribe. You can choose for the paper copy, you can choose for the electronic copy. And then if you have the electronic copy, for instance, it'll tell you when it's available to download.
Yeah, so it'd be great if we could attach to the website, and we'll put a link in the podcast as well to anyone who wants to download a sample copy so that they can get a bit of a look at it, a look and see. You mentioned that
some latest release, Holiness, if you want.
Okay, well, that'd be great. You mentioned that you reach out to a number of people to write articles and so on. How could people get involved if they're interested?
Please contact us. So they've actually just relaunched social media for Faith Alive, something that they started a few years ago and fizzled out a little bit. So we've relaunched it with Instagram and Facebook, so you can reach out to us on those, or you can reach out. There's an email address as well. And If you know someone who's already written for Faith Alive, then please ask them for our details. We're always looking for more authors. We try not to use the same people over and over again, but we would really like new people. Put yourself forward. We can even work with you to give you first choice of a topic in a magazine so that you can have as much of a head start as you'd like. If you're proactive, we'll definitely work with you.
And it's not a huge imposition. It's literally 300 words. It's one page, isn't it? It's like a 3/4 of an A4 page. It's really it's not that difficult in that sense. Exactly,
and typically we give somewhere between 4 and 8 weeks as a deadline. So 300 words in that length of time shouldn't be too tricky, hopefully.
I'll put a link into the description as well for that email address.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Joshua, thanks very much for joining Wilderness Conversations.
Thank you so much, and hopefully everyone's learned a little bit more about Faith Alive.